A wall of blue ice half a mile tall grinds south, swallowing whole valleys beneath it. Somewhere below that ice, a small band of humans huddles in a windswept cave, watching their breath freeze. Everything they love could die tonight. And yet, 100,000 years later, their children rule the earth. How did a few thousand fragile apes survive a frozen apocalypse that erased the mammoths themselves? The answer is written in bone, ash, and painted stone. Buried under snow for 10,000 years. This is the story of the coldest test our species ever faced. If human origins move you, subscribe now and walk it with us. To understand the danger, imagine the planet as it truly was during the last glacial maximum. Sheets of ice thicker than mountains covered Canada, northern Europe, and much of Asia. So much water was locked in ice that the oceans dropped 400 feet below today's shores. Dry land bridges appeared where seas had been, connecting continents beneath the frozen sky. Between the glaciers stretched the mammoth steppe, a vast frozen grassland reaching from Spain to the Bering Sea. It was not empty. Herds of woolly giants moved across it like living hills of fur. Woolly mammoths, their tusks curling 12 feet long, tore frozen grass from the iron-hard ground. Woolly rhinos, giant deer, and cave lions shared that plain, each armored against the endless cold. Among them walked humans, naked-skinned tropical animals with no fur, no claws, no fangs. By every rule of nature, we should not have lasted a single winter out on that steppe. But we carried something the mammoths never had, a brain that could plan for a season it could not yet see. Our ancestors could not grow warm fur, so they did something no animal had ever done. They took the fur from other animals and wore it as their own skin against the wind. Scrapers of sharpened flint peeled hides clean, turning a dead reindeer into a warm coat. In the frozen soil, archaeologists found eyed needles carved from bone, thinner than a matchstick. With those needles and sinew thread, humans sewed fitted clothing, sealing out the killing cold. A stitched seam sounds small, yet it may be the invention that let us walk into the ice. Warm bodies were only half the battle. Every day the steppe demanded food, and lots of it. A human in that cold burned thousands of calories just to keep the heart beating till dawn. Berries and roots lay buried under snow for months, so meat became the only reliable fuel. And the richest meat on the whole steppe walked on 4 legs and weighed 6 tons. To eat, our ancestors had to bring down the mammoth, and that was almost suicidal. Picture the scene. A bull mammoth, angry and enormous, against a ring of thin spear carriers. One swing of that trunk or one stamp of that foot could end a hunter instantly, so humans refused to fight fair. They turned the landscape itself into a weapon. Hunters drove herds toward frozen rivers, steep ravines, and hidden bogs that swallowed the giants. A mammoth trapped in mud or ice could not charge, and the spears closed in from every side. Their spears were tipped with flint napped to an edge sharper than modern surgical steel. Each flint point was struck from a stone core with dozens of precise, practiced blows. Later, hunters lashed those points onto darts and hurled them with an atlatl, a throwing lever. The atlatl doubled a spear's speed, letting a hunter strike from a safer distance across the snow. One kill fed a whole band for weeks, but the true genius came after the animal fell. Nothing was wasted. Meat was food, hide was clothing, sinew was thread, fat was fuel and warmth. And the mammoth's own bones became the frame of the house the hunters slept in. On the treeless steppe of Ukraine, humans stacked mammoth skulls and tusks into dome-shaped huts, dozens of jawbones interlocked like bricks, draped with hides, sheltering families from the gale outside. It was architecture built entirely from the hunt, a home made of the very beast they feared. But even the warmest bone hut was useless without one final sacred thing at its center. A small orange flame, flickering on a bed of ash, was the difference between life and a frozen corpse. Fire is where the human story truly turns. So let us follow the flame back to its beginning. Long before the ice, our distant ancestors met fire only as terror falling from the sky. Lightning struck the dry savanna, and a wall of flame sent every animal fleeing in panic. But early humans noticed something strange in the smoking grass after the fire passed through. Roasted seeds, cooked roots, and burned animals lay ready to eat among the blackened stalks. Instead of fleeing the flames forever, our ancestors began to follow them, scavenging the ashes. Then came the leap that changed everything, carrying a burning branch back to camp on purpose. A single glowing ember, cupped and fed with dry grass, meant fire on demand whenever we chose. Charred bones in a South African cave hint that humans tended flames a million years ago. Fire pushed back the darkness, and for the first time the night belonged partly to us. Cave lions and hyenas that hunted in blackness would not cross a ring of dancing flame. Around that light, the day no longer ended at sunset, and a new kind of time was born. Fire also reached into our very bodies by transforming the food we could eat. Cooking broke down tough meat and hard roots, unlocking calories our stomachs could never digest raw. With richer fuel, our guts could shrink and our hungry brains could grow larger still. In a real sense, the campfire helped build the very mind now telling you this story. Eventually, humans stopped waiting for lightning and learned to summon fire from cold stone and wood, strike iron-rich pyrite against flint, and a shower of hot sparks leaps onto waiting tinder. Spin a wooden drill against a board until friction glows, and smoke curls up from the notch. Now fire was portable knowledge, a technology carried in the hands wherever people wandered. That single skill let humans walk into places no naked ape had any right to survive. With clothing, weapons, and fire, our ancestors turned from prey into the steppe's most cunning predator. And once survival was mastered, a stranger, deeper hunger began to stir in the human mind. Deep inside the earth, far past the last touch of daylight, humans went looking for something. They crawled through black tunnels, holding stone lamps of burning animal fat, into the cave's heart. There, on the living rock, they raised their hands and began to paint in the dark. In Chauvet Cave, lions and rhinos charge across the stone, drawn 36,000 years ago. In Lascaux, great bulls and galloping horses stampede in ochre red and charcoal black. The artist used the cave's own bulges to give each bison a swelling, living shoulder. By torchlight, the shadows flickered, and those painted herds seemed to breathe and move on the wall. These were not idle doodles. Reaching them meant an hour crawling through lethal underground dark. Someone risked their life to leave these images, which means the images truly mattered to them. Beside the animals, humans pressed painted palms to the rock, leaving handprints across the centuries. Each stenciled hand is a signature that whispers a single message: I was here. I existed. This is the moment our ancestors stopped merely surviving and began to imagine, to symbolize, to mean. They carved plump figurines of women from mammoth ivory, worn smooth by anxious hands. They pierced fox teeth and seashells into necklaces, decorating themselves for reasons beyond mere warmth. On a bone flute of vulture wing, they cut finger holes and played the first human music. That flute means people sat by the fire making melodies deep in the Ice Age night. Some scratched rows of tally marks into bone, perhaps counting days, moons, or the coming herds. A mind that counts moons and paints beasts is a mind ready to remake the entire world. But that imagination first drove humans outward, across rivers, deserts, and frozen seas alike. Our species began in the warmth of Africa, then poured out across a hostile, glaciated planet. Small bands pushed north into Europe, meeting cold-adapted Neanderthals already living in those valleys. For thousands of years, the two kinds of humans shared the same frozen hunting grounds. They sometimes fought, sometimes traded, and sometimes met to raise children together by the fire. To this day, faint Neanderthal DNA survives inside billions of living people, a ghost in our blood. Yet the Neanderthals themselves vanished, leaving our lineage alone to inherit the icy north. Other bands turned east, following coastlines and river valleys across the whole width of Asia. They reached the tropical islands of Southeast Asia, where the sea itself blocked the way onward. Beyond the horizon lay Australia, unseen, with no land bridge to carry travelers across, so humans did the unthinkable. They built rafts or boats and paddled into the open ocean. 65,000 years ago, they crossed miles of deep water and stepped onto Australian sand. It was the first ocean voyage in history, made by people with only stone tools and nerve. Meanwhile, in the frozen far northeast, the falling seas revealed the greatest bridge of all. Between Siberia and Alaska stretched Beringia, a cold grassland where ocean would later return. Hunters chasing bison and mammoth wandered east across that plain without knowing they left one world. In a single, world-changing walk, humans stepped for the first time onto the Americas. A wall of ice at first blocked the way south, trapping them in the Alaskan cold. Then the glaciers cracked open a corridor, and people flowed south into two empty continents. They spread faster than almost anywhere, sweeping from Alaska to Patagonia in a few thousand years. On the American plains, they hunted mammoth and giant bison with fluted Clovis spear points. By now, one restless species had touched nearly every continent on a frozen, glaciated Earth. No other large animal had ever colonized so many climates, from rainforest to tundra to desert. We did it not with claws or fur, but with the shared knowledge passed around the fire. A tool invented in one valley could spread across a continent within a few generations of trade. Bands separated by 1,000 miles exchanged shells, flint, and stories along river routes. This web of shared minds was our true superpower, greater than any single spear or flame. But the great cold that shaped us was about to release its grip on the world. Around 11,000 years ago, the sun's angle shifted, and the planet slowly began to warm. The mile-high glaciers groaned, cracked, and started their long retreat back toward the poles. Torrents of meltwater roared off the ice, carving new rivers into raw, exposed land. The seas rose, drowning the old land bridges and cutting Britain, Japan, and Australia adrift. Whole hunting grounds where mammoths once grazed vanished forever beneath the rising gray waves. As the world warmed, the open mammoth steppe gave way to spreading, whispering forests. Birch and pine crept north over the tundra, and dark woodland swallowed the grassy plains. The great cold-loving giants had nowhere left to go as their frozen homeland disappeared. One by one, the woolly mammoths dwindled until the last herds fell silent on lonely islands. The final mammoths died on a remote Arctic island, while pyramids already stood in Egypt. The age of the ice giants was ending, and the humans who hunted them had to change again. In the new forests, there were no mammoth herds to feast on, only scattered, wary game. So hunters shrank their weapons, crafting tiny flint blades called microliths for smaller, faster prey. They set these little blades into wooden shafts to make arrows and slender barbed harpoons, and in this softened world, a shivering gray wolf began creeping closer to the human fire. The boldest wolves fed on scraps at the camp edge, and the friendliest were allowed to stay. Over generations, those wolves became dogs, the first animal to join our species as a partner. A dog guarded the camp, tracked the hunt, and slept warm beside the children in the night. For the first time, humans and another creature had chosen to live their whole lives together. The warming forests and rivers now teemed with fish, fowl, deer, nuts, and ripening wild fruit. In some rich valleys, food grew so plentiful that people stopped wandering to chase it. They lingered by lakes and rivers, building sturdier huts instead of endless temporary camps. In the Middle East, wild wheat and barley grew thick across the golden Fertile Crescent hills. Families gathered these wild grains by the basketful, threshing and grinding them into coarse flour. Then someone noticed that spilled seeds sprouted into fresh plants right beside the camp floor. That single quiet observation would rewrite the future of the entire human species forever. Deliberately, people began pushing seeds into the soil and waiting for the green shoots to rise. They pulled weeds, carried water, and guarded the growing crop from hungry birds and beasts. For the first time, humans were not just taking from nature, but actively growing their own food. They saved the plumpest seeds from the best plants to sow again the following spring. Season after season, the grains grew larger and easier to harvest under human hands. This slow shaping of wild wheat into fat farm grain was the birth of agriculture. They tamed animals too, penning wild goats and sheep drawn to the grain around the camp. A herd of goats meant milk, meat, and wool waiting close by, no dangerous hunt required. Wild cattle and pigs followed until the roaming hunters slowly became patient, settled herders. With fields to tend and flocks to guard, people could no longer pack up and wander away. They put down roots beside their crops and built homes meant to stand for many years. Mud brick and stone houses rose in clusters along the rivers of the Fertile Crescent. Where a handful of huts once stood, whole villages of hundreds now clustered together. At Cattle Hoyuk, homes packed so tightly that people walked across the rooftops and climbed down through them. A full granary meant a village could survive a hard winter without a single hunt, but stored grain also had to be counted, guarded, divided, and defended from raiders and thieves. From that need to track the harvest, humans pressed the first clay tokens and tally marks. Those humble counting marks would one day grow into numbers, writing, and human history itself. Farming also freed some hands from the daily hunt for the very first time in our story. A surplus of grain meant not everyone had to spend every hour chasing the next meal. Some people became potters, shaping clay bowls to store oil, seeds, and precious water. Others wove baskets and cloth, chipped fine tools, or carved beads to trade between villages. For the first time, a human could specialize in a craft instead of only gathering food. This division of labor is the deep root from which every later city would eventually grow. In the hills of Anatolia, hunter-gatherers raised the massive stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe, carved with foxes, snakes, and vultures. These T-shaped stones may be humanity's oldest temple. Astonishingly, people quarried and raised them before farming had even fully taken hold. It hints that shared belief and gathering, not just hunger, first pulled humans into large groups. As villages swelled, people needed new rules to share water, land, and the stored grain fairly. Leaders arose, boundaries were drawn, and property became something worth defending with force. The old equal band of wandering hunters was giving way to a settled, layered new world. Not everything about the change was kind, for crowded villages bred new, invisible dangers. Living close to goats, cattle, and pigs let animal diseases leap for the first time into humans. Grain-heavy diets and crowded houses could leave farmers shorter and sicker than their hunting ancestors. Yet the fields fed far more mouths, and the human population began climbing as never before. From a few scattered bands surviving the ice, humans multiplied into a rising tide of villages. Those first mud brick hamlets would grow into towns, then walled cities, then sprawling kingdoms. Every wheat field, every temple, and every crowded street traces straight back to the Ice Age fire. The needle that sewed a reindeer coat is the ancestor of every machine we build today. The flint knap for a mammoth spear is the grandparent of all our steel and silicon. The ember carried in cupped hands became the furnace, the engine, and the city's glow at night. The handprint pressed on a cave wall became the alphabet, the painting, and the printed page. We are the descendants of the ones who did not freeze, did not starve, and did not give up. Their courage in the cold is quietly encoded in the body and mind of every person alive. When you light a stove, wear a coat, or share a meal, you repeat their oldest victories. The Ice Age did not defeat us, it forged us, sharpening the species we would become. Cold demanded cooperation, and the humans who shared fire and food outlived those who hoarded it. Hardship demanded invention, and each frozen crisis pushed our restless minds to build something new. Everything that makes us human was tested and tempered on that vast, unforgiving frozen steppe. From painted caves to golden wheat fields, one thread runs unbroken through the whole long story. That thread is the stubborn, creative, fiercely social spark carried in fragile human hands. The glaciers have retreated, but that ancient spark still burns behind your eyes tonight. So if this frozen chapter of your own family history stirred something in you, pause here a moment. Hit like if you feel that pull toward the deep past because it tells us to keep digging. Then tell me in the comments, which invention truly saved us, the needle, the spear, or the flame? I read every answer, and the best ones will shape how we tell the next chapter together. Subscribe now so you never miss where this ancient human journey travels next across time. Because in our next episode, we leave the ice and follow the very first rivers of civilization. We will walk into the first true cities, where mud, brick, and grain gave birth to kings. The Ice Age made us human. What we built next made us legend. Stay by the fire, and I will show you.